I never thought I'd be the kind of person who keeps a folder of screenshots, dated receipts, and handwritten notes tucked inside a shoebox under my bed. But after what my sister-in-law did at my mother-in-law's retirement party, I learned that sometimes the only thing standing between you and a ruined life is a paper trail. Let me back up. I've been married to my husband for 9 years. We met in our late 20s, fell in love fast, and built something I was genuinely proud of. A small house in Columbus, 2 rescue dogs, a garden that actually produces tomatoes now after 3 failed summers. Nothing glamorous, just ours. His family is a different story. His younger sister, I'll call her my sister-in-law because that's what she is, even if the title still stings, had never liked me. Not from the first Thanksgiving, not from our wedding, not from any of the dozen Christmases and 4th of July barbecues in between. I tried for years. I brought dishes to every potluck. I remembered her kids' birthdays. I sat through 3-hour conversations about her career, her renovations, her husband's golf handicap, and I asked follow-up questions and I meant them. None of it mattered. She had decided somewhere early on that I wasn't good enough for her brother. Too quiet, maybe. Too ordinary. Or maybe she just didn't want to share him. I never fully understood it, and at some point I stopped trying to. My mother-in-law, though, she was different. She was warm and funny, and she called me every Sunday just to check in, even when things were tense with her daughter. She retired after 31 years as a hospital administrator, and her co-workers threw her a big party at a banquet hall in Worthington. My husband and I drove up together. My sister-in-law and her husband were already there when we arrived. The room was full of people I didn't know, former colleagues, friends from her church, a few neighbors. Long tables with white tablecloths and little centerpieces, an open bar in the corner, a slideshow running on a loop with photos from my mother-in-law's career. It was a genuinely lovely evening. My mother-in-law had worn a particular brooch that night. A small gold cameo her own mother had given her, oval, delicate. A woman's profile carved in cream. She'd mentioned it to me before. It had belonged to her grandmother originally, passed down through the family. She wore it on the lapel of her navy blazer and it caught the light every time she turned. I noticed it when I hugged her hello. I told her it was beautiful. She touched it like it was the most natural thing in the world to touch, and smiled. Dinner was fine. I sat across from my sister-in-law and kept things polite. We talked about nothing. The food was decent, chicken or salmon, that classic banquet choice, and the speeches were long but sincere. My mother-in-law cried twice and laughed more than that. It was a good night right up until it wasn't. About an hour after dinner, my mother-in-law pulled me aside near the hallway by the restrooms. Her face had changed. She was trying to hold herself together, but I could see it, that particular stonus people get when they're fighting not to cry in public. "My brooch is gone," she said. "I've checked everywhere. It was on my jacket all night, and now it's just gone." I felt a cold drop of something in my chest. "What do you mean gone? Did it fall off?" The clasp was fine. I checked it twice before I left the house. She pressed her lips together. I don't know what happened. I told her we'd find it. We'd retrace her steps. Someone would have picked it up off the floor and turned it in. These things happen at big events. I believed all of that when I said it. We didn't find it. My sister-in-law was the one who suggested we check everyone's things. She said it casually, standing in the middle of the room, loud enough that a small cluster of my mother-in-law's co-workers could hear. "I mean, if it didn't fall, then someone has it. We should just check." She looked around the room with this expression I can only describe as performing concern. I hate to say it, but we're not all strangers here. I felt the air shift. I looked at my husband. He was frowning at his sister. "That's not necessary," he said quietly. "Mom's upset," she said. "We should do something." And then she looked at me. Just for a second. Just long enough. I'd like to say I knew then. I didn't. I thought I was being paranoid. My mother-in-law said she didn't want to accuse anyone, that it might still turn up, that we should just go home, and she'd call the venue in the morning. She was gracious about it even when she was hurting, which is exactly who she is. We gathered our things to leave. My husband went to get the car. I went to the coat check to retrieve my jacket and my purse. My purse. A black canvas tote I've had for 4 years. Nothing special. I keep my wallet in it, my keys, a small pouch of lip balm and Advil and hair ties, a few pens. I know what's in it, the way you know the contents of your own bathroom cabinet. Automatically, without thinking, I unzipped it to find my keys and my hand touched something hard and small and unfamiliar. I pulled it out. It was the cameo brooch. I stood in the coat check doorway, completely still, holding my mother-in-law's brooch in my palm and trying to understand what I was looking at. My first thought was that there had been some mistake. My second thought was that I needed to not be standing here alone with this in my hand. I walked straight back into the banquet room. My husband wasn't back yet. My sister-in-law was standing near the exit talking to her husband. My mother-in-law was sitting at a table near the front, still holding a napkin, looking tired. "I found it," I said. My voice came out flat. It was in my purse. Everything after that happened very fast and very slow at the same time. My mother-in-law stood up. My sister-in-law turned around. The few people still in the room looked over. And my mother-in-law, I watched it happen, watched her face cycle through relief and then something else, something complicated and painful that she tried to hide, reached out and took the brooch from my hand. "How did it get in your bag?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "I didn't put it there." "She was at the coat check," my sister-in-law said from across the room. "Not to me, to her mother. She had her bag with her all night. So did everyone else," I said. "But it was in your bag." My husband walked back in right then, and I've never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. I told him what happened. He looked at the brooch in his mother's hand, then at me, then at his sister, and he went very quiet in that way he does when he's thinking hard. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "Why would she have taken it?" "I'm not accusing anyone," my mother-in-law said quickly. "I'm sure there's an explanation, but the damage was already threading through the room. I could feel it. That specific social temperature drop, the way people stop meeting your eyes." 2 of my mother-in-law's colleagues excused themselves. Her friend from church said something about it being a long evening. The party ended 20 minutes after it was supposed to. We drove home almost entirely in silence. My husband held my hand on the gear shift. He didn't say he believed me, but he didn't say he didn't. I didn't know which was worse. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, going over the evening minute by minute, trying to remember every moment my purse had been within reach of someone else. The coat check, the bathroom, the dinner table, the hallway. And then I remembered there was a moment during the cocktail hour, maybe 45 minutes in, when I'd set my purse down on one of the high-top tables near the bar. I'd set it down because my mother-in-law had called me over to introduce me to someone, and I'd gone without thinking. I was away from that table for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7. My sister-in-law had been standing near the bar when I came back. I thought about this for a long time in the dark. I thought about the way she'd looked at me in that room, the way she'd suggested checking everyone's things, loudly in front of witnesses, before the brooch had even been confirmed missing from the room, like she already knew where it was. I got up at 2 a.m. and went to my phone. The venue had a website. I found their contact page and sent an email asking whether they had security cameras in the event space and whether footage from that evening would be available. I told them I was a guest at a party and that a family heirloom had gone missing during the event. I kept it short. I didn't explain everything. I just asked. Then I opened my phone's Photos app. I'm not someone who takes a lot of pictures, but I'd taken a few that night. One of my mother-in-law at the podium during the speeches, one of my husband and her together, one of the centerpiece, because I liked the flowers. I scrolled through them slowly. One of the photos I almost skipped past entirely. I'd taken it by accident, I thought. A blurry shot of the bar area during the cocktail hour, aimed at nothing in particular. But when I zoomed in, I could see the high-top table where I'd left my purse. It was partially in frame, off to the left, and standing right next to it, her hand near the opening, was my sister-in-law. The timestamp on the photo was 6:47 p.m. I screenshotted it, saved it separately, and emailed it to myself. I didn't say anything to my husband that night. I needed to think. The venue emailed me back the next morning. They said they did have cameras in the space and that the footage was retained for 2 weeks. They asked me to follow up with more details. I wrote back immediately. That same afternoon, my mother-in-law called. She said she'd been up thinking, that she didn't believe I had taken it, that she was sorry the evening had ended the way it did. She was crying a little. She said she'd talked to my sister-in-law and that her daughter had said she wasn't making any accusations, just raising a question. I know, I said. I know she wasn't accusing me. But we both knew that wasn't quite true. I asked her, gently, if she would be willing to come with me to the venue to look at the footage. I told her I had a photo. I told her I thought I knew what had happened, but that I needed her to see it for herself, because if I was right, she deserved to know, and if I was wrong, I needed to know that too. There was a long pause. Okay, she said. We went 3 days later, a Wednesday afternoon. My husband came with us. My sister-in-law did not know we were going. The venue manager was a polite, unhurried man named Ted, who walked us through the footage on a laptop in his small office off the main hallway. He'd already queued it up to the cocktail hour, based on the time I'd given him. We watched together. At 6:44 p.m., I set my purse down on the high-top table near the bar. You can see me walk away toward the left side of the frame. At 6:46, my sister-in-law approaches the table. She picks up a glass from a nearby tray. That part looks casual, like she's just getting a drink. But then she stops. She sets the glass back down. She reaches into my purse. It takes less than 5 seconds. She withdraws her hand, turns, and walks away. My mother-in-law made a sound I will never forget. Not loud, not dramatic. Just this small, exhausted sound, like something she'd been holding for a long time finally let go. My husband sat very still beside her. She did it, he said. Not a question. Nobody answered him. Nobody needed to. Ted made us a copy of the footage on a USB drive. I thanked him. My mother-in-law was quiet for most of the drive home. She didn't cry in the car, but she held her purse in her lap with both hands the entire way, like it was the only thing she knew how to hold on to. That evening, my mother-in-law called her daughter. I wasn't there for that call. I don't know everything that was said. What I do know is that my sister-in-law came to my mother-in-law's house 2 days later, and my husband and I were asked to be there. She didn't apologize right away. She spent the first 10 minutes trying to explain. She said she'd only moved the brooch to keep it safe, that she'd meant to give it back, that it had been an impulse. She talked around the word stole the entire time. She never used it. My mother-in-law let her finish. Then she placed the USB drive on the coffee table between them and said, I watched the footage. I watched you go into her bag. I want you to tell me, right now, that you are going to give it back. And I want you to look me in the eye when you say it. My sister-in-law looked at the USB drive. She looked at her mother. She looked at me once, quickly, and then away. She didn't finish the sentence. The room was very quiet. My husband reached over and took my hand without looking at me. The confrontation lasted another 30 minutes. There were tears, my sister-in-law's, eventually. There was no grand speech from me. I didn't need to give one. The footage had said everything I couldn't have conveyed with words alone, because words can be disputed and video can't. What came after was not a clean resolution. I want to be honest about that, because these things rarely are. My sister-in-law apologized to me eventually. It was stiff and late and felt like something she was doing to get out of the room rather than something she meant. Maybe she'll mean it someday. I don't know. My mother-in-law apologized to me too. Longer, warmer, more genuine. She said she was ashamed that it had happened under her roof, at her party, on a night that was supposed to be a celebration. She said she should have said something sooner, more clearly, the night it happened. I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. My husband and I talked for a long time after that, in our kitchen at midnight with the dogs asleep on the floor and the dishwasher running. He said he was sorry he hadn't defended me more firmly in that banquet room when it mattered most. He said he'd spent a long time telling himself his sister wouldn't do something like that, and that holding on to that belief had cost me something real. That mattered more to me than anything. My relationship with my sister-in-law is not repaired. I'm not sure it ever fully will be, and I'd made a kind of peace with that. Some ruptures don't close, they just scar over, and you learn to live alongside them. What I know now is that I'm not going to keep pouring myself into a relationship that has always been built on her terms, in her image, at my expense. What I also know is this: for years, I had walked into that family braced for impact. Carefully worded, carefully dressed, carefully nice, and none of that had protected me. What protected me was a blurry accidental photo I almost deleted, a 2-week footage retention policy, and the decision to get up at 2 a.m. and send an email instead of lying in the dark waiting for something to change on its own. I'm not someone who tells this story to make myself sound brave. I was terrified the whole time. I cried in my car in the venue parking lot before I went inside. I rehearsed what I was going to say to Ted approximately 40 times on the drive over. I doubted myself every single step of the way, but I kept going anyway. And when it was over, when I finally drove home with a USB drive in my coat pocket and my mother-in-law's hand squeezed still warm on my arm, I thought about every woman who has ever stood in a room holding something that didn't belong to her and been looked at like she put it there herself. Every woman who was asked to explain herself before anyone asked whether the accusation made sense. Every woman who went home and couldn't sleep and had to decide, alone in the dark, whether she was going to fight for herself or just let it go. I want you to know, if you're in that place, if you're sitting with that weight right now, keep your receipts. Keep your photos. Send the email even if it's 2 a.m. and you're not sure it'll go anywhere. The truth has a way of being findable if you don't give up on looking for it. I've thought a lot about what that evening cost and what it gave back. My sister-in-law didn't lose everything that night. She kept her marriage, her house, her spot at the holiday table. Life didn't punish her in some dramatic, visible way. But something shifted that can't be unshifted. The people who loved her most watched a video on a laptop in a venue manager's office and saw exactly who she was in an unguarded moment. That's not something you can talk your way out of. That's not something time completely erases. What we do when we think no one is watching. That's the truest version of us, and eventually, it finds a way into the light. I used to think that being a good person was its own protection. That if I kept my head down and acted with decency, nothing truly bad could stick to me. That night in the banquet room taught me how naive that was. Being decent doesn't make you untouchable. It doesn't stop people from lying about you or from believing the lie. What it does, and I believe this with everything I have now, is give you something solid to stand on when everything else gets pulled out from under you. I knew I hadn't taken that brooch. I knew it so completely that I got up at 2 a.m. and did something about it instead of collapsing into the humiliation of being accused. That matters, not because it makes a good story, but because I almost didn't do it. I almost told myself it was too much trouble. I almost convinced myself that sending an email to a venue at 2 in the morning was the kind of thing that only happened in movies. And if I had done that, if I had let the fear of looking foolish stop me from asking a simple question, I would still be the woman who took her mother-in-law's brooch in the eyes of everyone at that party. What I've come to understand is that intelligence isn't just what you know. It's what you do with what you notice. I noticed the timestamp on that blurry photo. I noticed the 2-week footage window. I noticed that my sister-in-law had positioned herself near my bag and then loudly suggested searching everyone's belongings before the brooch was even confirmed missing from the room. None of those things required brilliance. They just required me to pay attention and trust what I was seeing, even when trusting myself felt like the harder thing to do. And then I had to keep going when I wasn't sure it would lead anywhere. That's the part nobody talks about. Not the moment of triumph, but all the moments before it when you have no idea if you're doing the right thing or just making a fool of yourself in slow motion. I sat in that parking lot before going inside and I was genuinely shaking. I didn't feel brave. I felt like someone who really needed this to work out and had no guarantee that it would. But I went in anyway. My mother-in-law squeezed my arm when we were leaving the venue. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Some things get communicated in the space between words, in the way someone holds on for just a second longer than they have to. I think about the women who don't have a photo, who don't have cameras, who walk away carrying an accusation they can't disprove and spend years wondering if they should have fought harder. I think about how easily this could have gone the other way. If I'd left my phone in my coat, if the venue had wiped the footage, if I'd talked myself out of sending that email. What protected me wasn't luck exactly. It was the decision to act like the truth was worth finding, even before I had proof that finding it was possible. That's the only thing I'd tell anyone in that position. The truth doesn't advertise itself. You have to go looking for it, and you have to believe, even when everything feels uncertain, that you are worth the looking.